She said, do you understand the responsibility that America plays in this role? She said, you have to be the beacon of hope for religious liberty. She said, because you're the only one that has it written in your law. So when I think about the responsibility that this administration has, whether it's our members in the House or the Senate, their friends and colleagues over there, we do have a responsibility to raise our voices, but then to add to those voices specific action steps and measures that we would see and deem necessary. And one of the things that we have, one of the tools, if you will, is to be able to put a country on the particular countries of particular concern. Now, for some of you that may be new, some of you that may understand, only the President of the United States and the Secretary of State has the authority to designate a country on the CPC list. There are other lists. There's a special watch list. I won't call it necessarily a precursor in that. But one of the action steps that was crucial over the last 6 or 7 months, Nigeria has really become to the forefront. 70% of all Christians that are martyred come out of the continent of Africa, and 90% of that number have come out of the country, specifically of Nigeria. In fact, we had a great conversation with the governor there today and what they're trying to do at work. So when President Trump took a bold step to list them as a CPC list, it was an action step. It was one that was much needed to be able to tell not only the government, but to the rest of the world that we're monitoring these things. When this kind of egregious behavior, these kind of atrocities are committed, I thought often, I was a pastor, a minister for 16 years before entering into Congress, working in mission trips, working in some interesting places. What it must be like for a young child to wonder which terroristic group may be bursting through their door that night to kidnap them or their parents or even worse. So to be able to have that tool at our disposal, I think is very, very crucial. And not only just to make sure that countries are thinking, well, I'm not on the CPC list, we're off the hook. That's not necessarily so. We saw Secretary Rubio leading, most recently, restricting some of the visa programs for those individuals, those bad actors that would be utilizing their authority or other things to attack the most vulnerable in our faith communities. We've seen individuals already become restricted from being able to come here based on that action by Secretary Rubio. So those are just a couple of examples as we continue to get out there and to engage as principal advisor in this particular, I guess specifically on my behalf as far as what action role is to connect with my colleagues there in the House and the Senate and look for policy opportunities, for measures. We've got some great guys over there that are very concerned, authentically concerned about what's happening across the world, not just in Nigeria, and partnering them to push for legislation that lasts much longer than just a single administration to make sure that we're doing all we can both now and in the future to protect those people across the world that are willing to stand up for their faith.
Thank you. And I've gotten to know you a bit over the past 6-9 months or so, and you are the perfect man for this job, and we are all very grateful that you're there. I do just want to remind everybody that President Trump in 2018 took the opportunity when then President Buhari from Nigeria visited during a state visit to bring up the issue of the Christians then, and Nigeria did not do anything about it for many years. So, there are so many different tools and ways that this can be addressed, sometimes privately, sometimes publicly, obviously through these other tools, but I'm grateful to see the President continuing to speak about that and make that an issue. And I know we all pray that Nigeria learns their lesson this time and gets the job done this time and fixes the problem. So thank you for your work. Scott, from your decades of experience advancing human rights and religious freedom at the State Department, also White House National Security Council before me, but shared seats there, and now as Senior Advisor at Human Rights First, could you share your insight on the evidence-based linkages between violations of religious freedom, protections and national security, and effective forms of advocacy, given those linkages? And similarly, maybe you can talk to them about countries where you've seen higher levels of religious freedom leading to reduced instability, stronger economic performance, and enhanced long-term security, and maybe what policy implications this holds for the U.S.
Well, thanks, Sarah, and thanks for having me here. I'm a generalist, human rights generalist, and I advocated on a wide range of issues over the 30-year course of my career, including religious freedom. And I was a civil servant, serving both Republican and Democratic administrations. And I want to reinforce a point that Nicole made, which was I've watched both Republicans and Democrats speak to this issue, support this issue. I was actually in the Clinton White House when the IRF Act was passed, in part with the support of the Clinton administration, and I saw how it was implemented under subsequent administration. So I do think we need to retain that history, remind ourselves of that history. The second cool thing I found about freedom of religion is that it encompasses all the other fundamental freedoms in it. Fundamental freedoms being freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of association, freedom of expression, freedom of movement. You find all those features within religious freedom. So religious freedom is a barometer, generally, I have found in my career, for how other freedoms are treated. Similarly, I found that where you see restrictions on other fundamental freedoms besides religious freedom, you then also see restrictions on religious freedom. So in my, as Nicole pointed out as well too, I think there is a strong correlation between religious freedom and democracy as well. What I found over the course of my career was that advocacy for religious freedom was most effective when it was effectively integrated into our general human rights advocacy as well as our national security. So it wasn't an issue off on its own, making its own case. It wasn't just Mark going into the Secretary of State's office or the President's office to make the case. It was also the Assistant Secretary for DRL. It was also other national security officials making that case. So I think it's very important to think about linkages among issues, particularly other human rights issues and religious freedom, as well as linkages between national security and religious freedom. Two cases in point that I experienced. One, I was a member of one of the first dialogues we held with the Burmese government. And soon after Burma started to open up, it's unfortunately closed down big time since then, but as it was opening up, they agreed to have a human rights dialogue. And one of the most effective things about that dialogue was we managed to persuade a uniformed Department of Defense official to join us on the delegation to make the case for human rights and particularly religious freedom there. As any of you who know Burma know that the religious freedom there, issues there are profound, whether it's the Rohingya, whether it's Karen Christians, those are significant issues. And having that uniform national security official there on our delegation, we could tell, got the other side to pay greater attention. So that's one thing that has to happen.
It's a great example.
The other case that I remember, I did a lot of human rights dialogues and advocacy for human rights and for religious freedom in Vietnam. And there too, we sought to integrate religious freedom into the whole basket of issues that we were advocating with the Vietnamese government. Moreover, we managed to link those issues to both trade issues as well as national security issues. So getting those other agencies and other officials to be part of the team, if you will, in advocating for religious freedom is absolutely key. The last point I want to make, given the integration of religious freedom with other human rights, is the importance of our international treaties that commit us to protecting religious freedom globally. International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as others. And we at Human Rights First have undertaken a specific effort to try to encourage governments around the world to respect these treaties, to adhere to these treaties. And if anyone wants to sign on to our joint letter urging governments to do that, we would welcome them. Please, you can look for me afterwards.
That's great. Thank you, Scott. We've got a few more minutes, and so I thought I would ask a question for you all to respond to. In your collective experience advocating for religious freedom, how would you describe the inherent vulnerabilities of autocratic regimes when it comes to allowing religious liberty? And specifically, why does religious freedom often serve as an Achilles heel for autocrats, potentially undermining their control through moral authority, community mobilization, all kinds of ways? But why is it their Achilles heel? How have you seen that?
I'd be happy to jump in on that. I think when you look at many of the autocratic regimes around the world, they are trying to ensure that they hold tightly to power, that there is no threat from any group that is assembling independently, that is thinking independently, or that is challenging their thinking. That's why they go after oppositionists very quickly. That's why they go after unionists very quickly. But there's something unique about faith communities. They hold as an inherent part something much higher than any government, than any administration, than any one individual who chooses to take hold of power. And that's an inherent threat to an autocratic regime, because these are people, and you heard it from Grace, and you heard it how her father is navigating a horrible, horrible, unjust detention by thinking of something which is far bigger than his personal status right now and the government that has unjustly imprisoned him. And that is a threat. I think we have an opportunity to flip the script on many of these autocrats and show that communities of faith are actually the stabilizing force in many, many countries, because they are focused on what is most important: worship, or coming together and doing service, or contributing to the community.